Chapter 7. The next day was bad. My parents had both left the house before I woke. It turned cold, and the sky was a bleak and charmless gray. I went through my parents' bedroom to the balcony that ran along the length of their bedroom, and my sister's and mine, and I stood on the long balcony and I prayed to the sky that Ursula Monkton would have tired of this game and that I would not see her again. Ursula Monkton was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs when I went down.
Same rules as yesterday, little pitcher.
She said.
You can't leave the property. If you try, I will lock you in your bedroom for the rest of the day, and when your parents come home, I will tell them you did something disgusting.
They won't believe you.
She smiled sweetly.
Are you sure? If I tell them you pulled out your little willy and whittled all over the kitchen floor, and I had to mop it up and disinfect it, I think they'll believe me. I'll be very convincing.
I went out of the house and down to my laboratory. I ate all the fruit that I had hidden there the day before. I read Sandy Sees It Through, another one of my mother's books. Sandy was a plucky but poor schoolgirl who was accidentally sent to a posh school, where everybody hated her. In the end, she exposed the geography teacher as an international Bolshevik who had tied the real geography teacher up. The climax was in the school assembly, when Sandy bravely got up and made a speech which began, "I know I should not have been sent here. It was only an error in paperwork that sent me here and sent Sandy spelled with a Y to the town grammar school. But I thank Providence that I came here, because Miss Stribling is not who she claims to be." In the end, Sandy was embraced by the people who had hated her. My father had come early from work, earlier than I remembered seeing him home for years. I wanted to talk to him, but he was never alone. I watched him from the branch of my beech tree. First he showed Ursula Monkton around the gardens, proudly pointing to the rose bushes and the black currant bushes and the cherry trees and the azaleas, as if he had had something to do with them, as if they had not been put in place and tended by Mr. Wallery for 50 years before we had bought the house. She laughed at all of his jokes, and I could not hear what he was saying, but I could see the crooked smile he had when he knew he was saying something funny. She was standing too close to him. Sometimes he would rest his hand on her shoulder in a friendly sort of way. It worried me that he was standing so close to her. He didn't know what she was. She was a monster, and he just thought she was a normal person. And he was being nice to her. She was wearing different clothes today, a gray skirt, the kind they called the midi, and a pink blouse. On any other day, if I had seen my father walking around the garden, I would have run over to him, but not that day. I was scared that he would be angry, or that Ursula Monkton would say something to make him angry with me. I was terrified of him when he was angry. His face, angular and usually affable, would grow red, and he would shout so loudly and furiously that it would literally paralyze me. I would not be able to think. He never hit me. He did not believe in hitting. He would tell us how his father had hit him, how his mother had chased him with a broom, how he was better than that. When he got angry enough to shout at me, he would occasionally remind me that he did not hit me, as if to make me grateful. In the school stories I read, misbehavior often resulted in a caning or the slipper, and then was forgiveness and done. And I would sometimes envy those fictional characters and the cleanness of their lives. I did not want to approach Ursula Monkton. I did not want to risk making my father angry with me. I wondered if this would be a good time to try and leave the property, to head down the lane, but I was certain that if I did, I would look up to see my father's angry face beside Ursula Monkton's, all pretty and smug. So I simply watched them from the huge branch of the beech tree. When they walked out of sight behind the azalea bushes, I clambered down the rope ladder, went up into the house, up to the balcony, and I watched them from there. It was a gray day, but there were butter yellow daffodils everywhere, and narcissi in profusion, with their pale outer petals and their dark orange trumpets. My father picked a handful of narcissi and gave them to Ursula Monkton, who laughed and said something, and then a curtsy. He bowed in return, and said something that made her laugh. I thought he must have proclaimed himself her knight in shining armor, or something like that. I wanted to shout down to him, to warn him that he was giving flowers to a monster, but I did not. I just stood on the balcony and watched, and they did not look up, and they did not see me. My book of Greek myths had told me that the narcissi were named after a beautiful young man, so lovely that he had fallen in love with himself. He saw his reflection in a pool of water, and would not leave it, and eventually died, so that the gods were forced to transform him into a flower. In my mind, when I read this, I knew that a narcissus must be the most beautiful flower in the world. I was disappointed when I learned that it was just a less impressive daffodil. My sister came out of the house and went over to them. My father picked her up. They all walked inside together. My father, with my sister holding on to his neck, and Ursula Monkton, her arms filled with yellow and white flowers. I watched them. I watched as my father's free hand, the one not holding my sister, went down and rested, casually, proprietarily, on the swell of Ursula Monkton's mini-skirted bottom. I would react differently to that now. And at the time, I do not believe I thought any of it at all. I was 7. I climbed up into my bedroom window, easy to reach from the balcony, and down onto my bed, where I read a book about a girl who stayed in the Channel Islands and defied the Nazis because she would not abandon her pony. And while I read, I thought, Ursula Monkton cannot keep me here forever. Soon enough, in a few days at the most, someone will take me to town, or away from here. And then I will go to the farm at the bottom of the lane, and I will tell Lettie Hempstock what I did. Then I thought, suppose Ursula Monkton only needs a couple of days. And that scared me. Ursula Monkton made meatloaf for dinner that evening, and I would not eat it. I was determined not to eat anything that she made or cooked or touched. My father was not amused.
I don't want it.
I told him.
I'm not hungry.
It was Wednesday, and my mother was attending to her meeting to raise money so that people in Africa who needed water could drill wells. The meeting was in the village hall of the next village down the road. She had posters that she had put up, diagrams of wells, and photographs of smiling people. At the dinner table were my sister, my father, Ursula Monkton, and me.
It's good. It's good for you, and it's tasty,
said my father.
And we do not waste food in this house.
I said I wasn't hungry.
I had lied. I was so hungry, it hurt.
Then just try a little nibble,
he said.
It's your favorite. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes and gravy. You love them.
There was a children's table in the kitchen, where we ate when my parents had friends over, or would be eating late. But that night we were at the adult table. I preferred the children's table. I felt invisible there. Nobody watched me eat. Ursula Monkton sat next to my father and stared at me, with a tiny smile at the corner of her lips. I knew I should shut up, be silent, be sullen, but I couldn't help myself. I had to tell my father why I did not want to eat.
I won't eat anything she made,
I told him.
I don't like her.
You will eat your food,
said my father.
You will at least try it and apologize to Miss Monkton.
I won't.
He doesn't have to,
said Ursula Monkton sympathetically, and she looked at me, and she smiled. I do not think that either of the other two people at the table had noticed that she was smiling, or that there was nothing sympathetic about her expression, or her smile, or her rotting cloth eyes.
I'm afraid he does,
said my father. His voice was just a little louder, and his face was just a little redder.
I won't have him cheeking you like that.
Then to me.
Give me one good reason, just one, why you won't apologize and why you won't eat the lovely food that Ursula has prepared for us.
I did not lie well, I told him.
Because she's not human.
I said.
She's a monster.
What had the Hempstocks called her kind of thing?
She's a flea.
My father's cheeks were burning red now, and his lips were thin. He said,
Outside, into the hall, this minute.
My heart sank inside of me. I climbed down from my stool and followed him out into the corridor. It was dark in the hallway, and the only light came from the kitchen. A sheet of clear glass above the door. He looked down at me.
You will go back into the kitchen. You will apologize to Miss Monkton. You will finish your plate of food. Then, quietly and politely, you will go straight upstairs to bed.
No,
I told him.
I won't.
I bolted, ran down the hallway, round the corner, and I pounded up the stairs. My father, I had no doubt, would come after me. He was twice my size, and fast. But I did not have to keep going for long. There was only one room in that house that I could lock. And it was there that I was headed, left at the top of the stairs and along the wall to the end. I reached the bathroom ahead of my father. I slammed the door, and I pushed the little silver bolt closed. He had not chased me. Perhaps he thought it was beneath his dignity, chasing a child. But in a few moments I heard his fist slam, and then his voice saying,
Open this door!
I didn't say anything. I sat on the plush toilet seat cover, and I hated him almost as much as I hated Ursula Monkton. The door banged again, harder this time.
If you don't open this door,
he said, loud enough to make sure I heard it through the wood.
I'm breaking it down.
Could he do that? I didn't know. The door was locked. Locked doors stop people from coming in. A locked door meant that you were in there, and when people wanted to come into the bathroom, they would jiggle the door and they wouldn't open. And they would say, sorry, or shout, are you going to be long? And the door exploded inward. The little silver bolt hung off the frame, all bent and broken, and my father stood in the doorway, filling it, his eyes huge and white, his cheeks burning with fury. He said,
Right.
That was all he said. But his hand held my left upper arm in a grip I could have never have broken. I wondered what he would do now. Would he finally hit me? Or send me to my room, or shout at me so loudly that I would wish I were dead? He did none of those things. He pulled me over to the bathtub. He leaned over, pushed the white rubber plug into the plug hole. Then he turned on the cold tap. Water gushed out, splashing the white enamel. Then steadily, slowly, it filled the bath. The water ran noisily. My father turned to open the door.
I can deal with this,
he said to Ursula Monkton. She stood in the doorway, holding my sister's hand, and she looked concerned but gentle. But there was triumph in her eyes.
Close the door,
said my father. My sister started whimpering, but Ursula Monkton closed the door, as best she could, for one of the hinges did not fit properly, and the broken bolt stopped the door shutting all the way. It was just me and my father. His cheeks had gone from red to white, and his lips were pressed together. And I did not know what he was going to do or why he was running a bath, but I was scared. So scared.
I'll apologise.
I told him.
I'll say sorry. I didn't mean what I said. She's not a monster. She's pretty.
He didn't say anything in response. The bath was full, and he turned the cold tap off. Then swiftly he picked me up. He put his huge hands over my armpits, swung me up with ease, so I felt like I weighed nothing at all. I looked at him, at the intent expression of his face. He had taken off his jacket before he'd come upstairs. He was wearing a light blue shirt and a maroon paisley tie. He pulled off his watch on its expandable strap and dropped it into the window ledge. Then I realized what he was going to do, and I kicked out, and I flailed at him, neither of which action had any effect on any kind as he plunged me down into the cold water. I was horrified. But it was initially the horror of something happening against the established order of things. I was fully dressed. That was wrong. I had my sandals on. That was wrong. The bathwater was cold and so wrong. That was what I thought, initially, he pushed me into the water, and then pushed me further, pushing my head and shoulders beneath the chilly water. And the horror changed its nature. I thought, I'm going to die. And thinking that, I was determined to live. I flailed my hands, trying to find something to hold on to, but there was nothing to grab, only the slippery sides of the bath I'd bathed in for the last 2 years. I had read many books in that bath. It was one of my safe places, and now I had no doubt I was going to die there. I opened my eyes. Beneath the water I saw it dangling there, and in front of my face, my chance for life. I clutched it with both hands. My father's tie. I held it tightly, pulled myself up as he pushed me down, gripping it for life itself. Pulling my face up and out of that frigid water, holding onto his tie so tightly that he could no longer push my head and shoulders back into the bath without going in himself. My face was now out of the water, and I clamped my teeth into his tie, just below the knot. We struggled. I was soaked, took some small pleasure in the knowledge that he was soaked as well, his blue shirt clinking to its huge form. Now he pushed me down again, but fear of death gives us strength. My hands and teeth were clamped to his tie, but he could not break my grip on them without hitting me. My father did not hit me. He straightened up, and as I was pulled with him, soaked and spluttering and angry and crying and scared, I let go of his tie with my teeth, still held on with my hands. He said,
You ruined my tie. Let go.
The tie knot had tightened to pea size. The lining of the tie was dangling damply outside of it. He said,
You should be glad that your mother isn't here.
I let go. Dropped to the soaked bathroom carpet. I took a step backward toward the toilet. He looked down at me. Then he said,
Go to your room. I don't want to see you again tonight.
I went to my room. Chapter 8. I was shivering convulsively, and I was wet through, and I was cold. Very cold. It felt like all my heat had been stolen. The wet clothes hung to my flesh and dripped cold water onto the floor. With every step I took, my sandals made comical squelching noises, and the water oozed from the little diamond-shaped holes on the top of them. I pulled all my clothes off, and I left them in a sopping heap on the tiles by the fireplace, where they began to puddle. I took the box of matches from the mantelpiece, turned on the gas tap, and lit the flame in the gas fire. I am staring at a pond, remembering things that are hard to believe. Why do I find the hardest things for me to believe looking back? Is that a girl of 5 and a boy of 7 had a gas fire in their bedroom? There were no towels in the room, and I stood there, wet, wondering how to dry myself off. Or took the thin counterpane that had covered my bed and wiped myself on it. Then put on my pajamas. They were red nylon, shiny and striped, with a black plasticated burn mark on the left sleeve, where I had leaned too close to the gas fire once. And the pajama arm caught alight, although by some miracle I had not burned my arm. There was a dressing gown that I almost never used hanging on the back of the bedroom door, its shadow perfectly positioned to cast nightmare shadows on the wall when the hall light was on and the door was open. I put it on. The bedroom door opened, and my sister came in to get the nightdress from under her pillow. She said,
You've been so naughty that I'm not even allowed to be in the room with you. I get to sleep in Mommy and Daddy's bed tonight, and Daddy says I can watch the television.
There was an old television in a brown wooded cabinet in the corner of my parents' bedroom that was almost never turned on. The vertical hold was unreliable, and the fuzzy black and white picture had a tendency to stream. In a slow ribbon, people's heads vanished off the bottom of the screen as their feet descended, in a stately fashion, from the top.
I don't care.
I told her,
Daddy says you ruined his tie, and he's all wet.
said my sister, with satisfaction in her voice. Ursula Monkton was at the bedroom door.
We don't talk to him.
She told my sister.
We won't talk to him again until he's allowed to rejoin the family.
My sister slipped out, heading to the next room. My parents' room.
You aren't in my family.
I told Ursula Monkton.
When Mummy comes back, I'll tell her what Daddy did.
She won't be home for another 2 hours,
said Ursula Monkton.
And what can you say to her that will make any difference? She backs up your father in everything, doesn't she?
She did. They always presented a perfectly united front.
Don't cross me,
said Ursula Monkton.
I have things to do here, and you are getting in my way. Next time it will be so much worse. Next time I lock you in the attic.
I'm not afraid of you,
I told her. I was afraid of her. More afraid than I had ever been of anything.
It's hot in here,
she told me, and smiled. She walked over to the gas fire, reached down and turned it off. Took the matches from the mantel. I said,
You're still just a flea.
She stopped smiling. She reached up to the lintel above the door, higher than any child could reach, and she pulled down the key that rested there. She walked out of the room, closed the door, and I heard the key turn, heard the lock engage and click. I could hear television voices coming from the room next door. I heard the hallway door close, cutting off the 2 bedrooms from the rest of the house. And I knew that Ursula Monkton was going downstairs. I went over to the lock and squinted through it. I had learned from a book that I could use a pencil to push a key through a keyhole onto a sheet of paper underneath and free myself that way. But the keyhole was empty. I cried then, cold and still damp, in that bedroom. Cried with pain and anger and terror. Cried safely in the knowledge that no one would come in and see me. That no one would tease me for crying, as they teased any boys at my school who were unwise enough to give way to tears. I heard the gentle patter of raindrops across the glass of my bedroom window, and even that brought me no joy. I cried until I was all cried out. Then I breathed in huge gulps of air, and I thought, Ursula Monkton, flapping canvas monster, worm and flea, would get me if I tried to leave the property. I knew that. But Ursula Monkton had locked me in. She would not expect me to leave now. And perhaps, if I was lucky, she might be distracted. I opened the bedroom window and listened to the night. The gentle rain made a noise that was almost a rustling. It was a cold night and I was already chilled. My sister was in the room next door watching something on the television. She would not hear me. I went over to the door and turned off the light. I walked through the dark bedroom and climbed back on the bed. I'm in my bed, I thought. I'm lying in my bed, thinking about how upset I am, and soon I'll fall asleep. I'm in my bed, and I know she's won. And if she checks up on me, I'm in my bed, asleep. I'm in my bed, and it's time for me to sleep now. I can't even keep my eyes open. I'm fast asleep in my bed. I stood on the bed and climbed out of the window. I hung for a moment, then let myself drop, as quietly as I could, onto the balcony. That was the easy bit. Growing up, I took so many cues from books. They taught me most of what I knew about what people did, about how they behave. They were my teachers and my advisors. In books, boys climb trees, so I climbed trees. Sometimes they're very high, sometimes, well, rather always, I was scared of falling. In books, people climbed up and down drain pipes to get in and out of houses, so I climbed up and down drain pipes too. They were the heavy iron drain pipes of old, clamped to the brick, not today's lightweight plastic affairs. I had never climbed down a drain pipe in the dark, or in the rain, but I knew where the footholds were. I knew also that the biggest challenge would not be falling, a 20-foot tumble down into the wet flower bed. It was the drain pipe I was climbing down. Went past the television room, downstairs, in which I had no doubt Ursula Monkton and my father would be watching television. I tried not to think. I climbed over the brick wall that edged the balcony, reached out until I felt the iron drain pipe, cold and slick with the rain. I held on to it, then took one large step towards it, letting my bare feet come to rest on the metal clamp that encircled the drain pipe, fixing it sturdily to the brick. I went down, a step at a time, imagining myself Batman. Imagining myself 100 heroes and heroines of school romances. Then, remembering myself, I imagined that I was a drop of rain on the wall. A brick. A tree. I am on my bed, I thought. I was not here. With the light of the TV room uncurtained, spilling out below me, making the rain that fell past the window into a series of glittering lines and streaks. Don't look at me, I thought. Don't look out of the window. I inched down. Usually I would have stepped from the drain pipe over to the TV room's outer window ledge, but that was out of the question. Warily, I lowered myself another few inches, leaned further back into the shadows and away from the light, and stole a terrified glance into the room, expecting to see my father and Ursula Monkton staring back at me. The room was empty. The lights were on. The television was on as well, but nobody was sitting on the sofa. And the doors to the downstairs hallway was open. I took an easy step down onto the window ledge, hoping against all hope that neither of them would be back in and see me. Then I let myself drop from the ledge into the flower bed. The wet earth was soft against my feet. I was going to run, just run, but there was a light on in the drawing room, where we children never went. The oak-paneled room kept only for the best and for special occasions. The curtains were drawn. They were green velvet lined with white, and the light escaped from them, where they had not been closed all the way, was golden and soft. I walked over to the window. The curtains were not completely closed. I could see into the room, see what was immediately in front of me. I was not sure what I was looking at. My father had Ursula Monkton pressed up against the side of the big fireplace in the far wall. He had his back to me. She did too. Her hands pressed against the huge high mantelpiece. He was hugging her from behind. Her midi-skirt had hiked up around her waist. I did not know exactly what they were doing, and I did not really care. Not at that moment. All that mattered was that Ursula Monkton had her attention on something that was not me, and I turned away from the gap in the curtains, and the light, and the house, and fled, barefoot, into the rainy dark. It was not pitch black. It was the kind of cloudy night where the clouds seemed to gather up light from the distant streetlights from houses below, and throw it back at the earth. I could see enough once my eyes adjusted. I made it to the bottom of the garden, past the compost heap and the grass cuttings, then down the hill to the lane. Brambles and thorns stuck at my feet and pricked my legs, but I kept running. I went over to the low metal fence, into the lane. I was off the property, and I felt as if a headache I had not known that I had had suddenly lifted. I whispered urgently, "Lettie?"
Lettie Hempstock.
And I thought, I'm in bed. I'm dreaming all of this. Such vivid dreams. I am in my bed. But I did not believe that Ursula Monkton was thinking about me just then. As I ran, I thought of my father, his arms around the housekeeper who wasn't, kissing her neck, and then I saw his face through the chilly bathwater as he held me under. And now I was no longer scared by what had happened in the bathroom. Now I was scared by what it meant that my father was kissing the neck of Ursula Monkton, that his hands had lifted her midi-skirt above her waist. My parents were a unit, inviolate. The future had suddenly become unknowable. Anything could happen. The train of my life had jumped the rails and headed off across the fields. It was coming down the lane with me. Then, the flints of the lane hurt my feet as I ran. But I did not care. Soon enough I was certain the thing that was Ursula Monkton would be done with my father. Perhaps they would go upstairs to check on me together. She would find that I was gone, and she would come after me. I thought if they come after me, they will be in a car. I looked for a gap in the hedgerow on either side of the lane. I spotted a wooden stile and clambered over it, and kept running across the meadow, heart pounding like the biggest, loudest drum there was or had ever been, barefoot, with my pajamas and my dressing gown all soaked below the knee, and clinging. I ran, not caring about the cowpaths. The meadow was easier on my feet than the flint lane had been. I was happier, and I felt more real running on the grass. Thunder rumbled behind me, although I had seen no lightning. I climbed a fence, and my feet sank into the soft earth of a freshly plowed field. I stumbled across it, falling sometimes, but I kept going, over a stile and into the next field, this one unplowed, and as I crossed it, keeping close to the hedge, scared of being too far out in the open. The lights of a car came down the lane, sudden and blinding. I froze where I was, closed my eyes, imagined myself asleep in my bed. The car drove past without slowing, and I caught a glimpse of its red rear lights as it moved away from me. A white van that I thought belonged to the Andrews family. Still, it made the lane seem less safe, and now I cut away across the meadow. I reached the next field, and saw that it was only divided from the one I was in by thin lengths of wire, easy to duck beneath. Not even barbed wire. I reached down my arm and pushed a bare wire up to make room to squeeze under, and it was as if I had been thumped, and thumped hard, in my chest. My arm, where I had grasped the wire of the fence, was convulsed, and my palm was burning, just as if I had slammed my funny bone into a wall. I let go of the electric fence and stumbled back. I cannot run any longer, but I hurried in the wind and rain and darkness along the side of the fence, careful now not to touch it, until I reached a 5-bar gate. I went over the gate and across the field, heading to the deeper darkness at the far end. Trees, I thought, and woodland. And I did not go too close to the edge of the field in case there was another electric fence waiting for me. I hesitated, uncertain where to go next. As if in answer, the world was illuminated for a moment, but I only needed a moment. By lightning, I saw a wooden stile, and I ran for it. Over the stile I came down into a clump of needles. I knew as the hot, cold, pricking, burning covered my exposed ankles and the tops of my feet, but I ran again now, and ran as best as I could. I hoped I was still heading for the Hempstock's farm. I had to be. I crossed one more field before I realized that I no longer knew where the lane was, and, for that matter, where I was. I knew only that the Hempstock's farm was at the end of my lane, but I was lost in a dark field, and the thunderclouds had lowered, and the night was so dark, and it was still raining. Even if it was not raining hard yet, and now my imagination filled the darkness with wolves and ghosts. I wanted to stop imagining, to stop thinking, but I cannot. And behind the wolves and the ghosts and the trees that walked, there was Ursula Monkton, telling me that the next time I disobeyed her, it would be so much worse for me. That she would lock me in the attic. I was not brave. I was running from everything, and I was cold and wet and lost. I shouted at the top of my voice.
Lettie! Lettie Hempstock! Hello!
But there was no reply. And I had not expected one. The thunder grumbled and rumbled in a low, continuous roar. A lion pushed into irritability, and the lightning was flashing and flickering like a malfunctioning fluorescent tube. In the flickers of light I could see that the area of field I was in came to a point, with hedges on both sides, and no way through. I could see no gate and no stile other than the one I had just come in through, at the far end of the field. Something crackled. I looked up at the sky. I had seen lightning in films on the television, long, jagged forks of light across the clouds. But the lightning I had seen until now, with my own eyes, was simply a white flash from above, like the flash of a camera, burning the world into a strobe of visibility. What I saw in the sky then was not that. It was not forked lightning either. It came and it went, a writhing, burning blue whiteness in the sky. It died back and then it flared up. and its flares and flickers illuminated the meadow, made it something I could not see. The rain pattered hard, and then it whipped against my face, moved in a moment from a drizzle to a downpour, and in seconds my dressing gown was soaked through. But in the light I saw, or thought I saw, an opening in the hedgerow to my right, and I walked, for I could no longer run any longer, as fast as I could towards it, hoping it was something real. My white gown flapped in the gusting wind, and the sound of it horrified me. I did not look up in the sky. I did not look behind me. But I could see the far end of the field, and there was indeed a space between the hedgerows. I had almost reached it when a voice said,
I thought I told you to stay in your room, and now I find you sneaking around like a drowned sailor.
I turned, looked behind me, saw nothing at all. There was nobody there. Then I looked up. The thing that called itself Ursula Monkton hung in the air, about 20 feet above me, and lightnings crawled and flickered in the air behind her. She was not flying. She was floating, weightless as a balloon, although the sharp gusts of wind did not move her. Wind howled and whipped at my face, the distant thunder roared, and small thunders crackled and spat. She spoke quietly, but I could hear every word she said as distinctly as if she were whispering into my ears.
Oh, sweetie, tweety, pudding and pie, you are in so much trouble.
She was smiling, the hugest, toothiest grin I had ever seen on a human face. But she did not look amused. I had been running from her through the darkness for, half an hour, an hour? I wish I had stayed on the lane and not tried to cut across the fields. I would have been at the Hempstock's farm by now. Instead, I was lost and I was trapped. Ursula Monkton came lower. Her pink blouse was open and unbuttoned. She wore a white bra. Her midi-skirt flapped in the wind, revealing her calves. She did not appear to be wet, despite the storm. Her clothes, her face, her hair was perfectly dry. She was floating above me now, and she reached out her hands. Every move she made, everything she did was strobed by the tame lightnings that flickered and writhed around her. Her fingers opened like flowers in a speeded-up film. And I knew that she was playing with me. And I knew what she wanted me to do. And I hated myself for not standing my ground, but I did what she wanted. I ran. I was a little thing that amused her. She was playing, just as I had seen Monster, the big orange tomcat, play with a mouse, letting it go so that it would run, and then pouncing and batting it down with a paw. But the mouse still ran, and I had no choice. And I ran too. I ran for the break in the hedge as fast as I could, stumbling and hurting and wet. Her voice was in my ears as I ran.
I told you I was going to lock you in the attic, didn't I? And I will. Your daddy likes me now. He'll do whatever I say. Perhaps from now on, every night, he'll come up the ladder and let you out of the attic. He'll make you climb down from the attic, down the ladder. And every night, he'll drown you in the bath. He'll plunge you into the cold, cold water. I'll let him do it every night until it bores me. And then I'll tell him not to bring you back. Just simply push you under the water until you stop moving, until there's nothing but darkness and water in your lungs. I'll have him leave you in the cold bath, and you'll never move again. And every night, I'll kiss him and kiss him.
I was through the gap in the hedgerow and running on soft grass. The crackle of the lightning and the strange, sharp, metallic smell were so close that they made my skin prickle. Everything around me got brighter and brighter, illuminated by the flickering blue-white light.
And when your daddy finally leaves you in the bath for good, you'll be happy.
whispered Ursula Monkton, and I had imagined that I could feel her lips brushing my ears.
Because you won't like it in the attic. Not just because it's dark up there with the spiders and the ghosts, but because I'm going to bring my friends. You can't see them in the daylight, but they'll be in the attic with you, and you won't enjoy them at all. They don't like little boys, my friends. There'll be spiders as big as dogs, old clothes with nothing inside that tug at you and never let you go. The inside of your head. And no books and no stories ever again.
And I realized that I had not imagined it. Her lips had brushed my ear. She was floating in the air beside me, so her head was next to mine, and when she caught me looking at her, she smiled her pretend smile, and I could not run any longer. I could barely move. I had a stitch in my side, and I could not catch my breath, and I was done. My legs gave way beneath me, and I stumbled and fell, and this time I did not get up. I felt heat on my legs, and I looked down to see a yellow stream coming from the front of my pajama trousers. I was 7 years old, no longer a little child, but I was wetting myself with fear like a baby, and there was nothing I could do about it, while Ursula Monkton hung in the air above me and watched dispassionately. The hunt was done. She stood up straight in the air, 3 feet above the ground. I was sprawled beneath her on my back in the wet grass. She began to descend slowly, inexorably, like a person on a broken television screen. Something touched my left hand, something soft. It nosed my hand, and I looked over, fearing a spider as big as a dog. In the light of the lightnings that writhed about Ursula Monkton, I saw a patch of darkness behind my head. A patch of darkness with a white spot over one ear. I picked up the kitten in my hand and brought it to my heart, and I stroked it. I said,
I won't come with you. You can't make me.
I sat up, because I felt less vulnerable sitting, and the kitten curled and made itself comfortable in my hand.
Pudding and pie, boy,
said Ursula Monkton. Her feet touched the ground, illuminated by her own lightnings, like a painting of a woman in grays and greens and blues. Not a real woman at all. You're just a little boy.
You're just a little boy. I'm a grown-up. I was an adult when your world was a ball of molten rock. I can do whatever I wish to you. Now, stand up. I'm taking you home.
The kitten, which was burrowing into my chest with its face, made a high-pitched noise, not a mew. I turned, looking away from Ursula Monkton, looking behind me. The girl who was walking towards us, across the field, wore a shiny red raincoat, with a hood and a pair of black Wellington boots that seemed too big for her. She walked out of the darkness, unafraid. She looked up at Ursula Monkton.
Get off my land,
said Lettie Hempstock. Ursula Monkton took a step backwards and rose. At the same time, so she hung in the air above us. Lettie Hempstock reached out to me, without glancing down at where I sat. She took my hand, twining her fingers into mine.
I'm not touching your land,
said Ursula Monkton.
Go away, little girl.
You are on my land,
said Lettie Hempstock. Ursula Monkton smiled, and the lightnings wreathed and writhed about her. She was power incarnate, standing in the crackling air. She was the storm, she was the lightning, she was the adult's world with all its power and all its secrets and all its foolish casual cruelty. She winked at me. I was a 7-year-old boy, and my feet were scratched and bleeding. I had just sweat myself, and the thing that floated above me was huge and greedy. And it wanted to take me to the attic. And when it was tired of me, it would make my daddy kill me. Lettie Hempstock's hand in my hand made me braver. But Lettie was just a girl. Even if she was a big girl, even if she was 11, even if she had been 11 for a very long time, Ursula Monkton was an adult. It did not matter. At that moment, she was every monster, every witch, every nightmare made flesh. She was also an adult. And when adults fight children, adults always win. Lettie said,
You should go back where you came from in the first place. It's not healthy for you to be here. For your own good, go back.
A noise in the air, a horrible, twisted, scratching noise, filling with pain and with wrongness, a noise that set my teeth on edge and made the kitten, its front paws resting on my chest, stiffen and its fur prickle. The little thing twisted and clawed up onto my shoulder, and it hissed and it spat. I looked up at Ursula Monkton, and it was only when I saw her face that I knew what the noise was. Ursula Monkton was laughing.
Go back. When your people ripped the hole in forever, I seized my chance. I could have ruled worlds, but I followed you, and I waited, and I had patience. I knew that sooner or later the bounds would loosen, that I would walk the true earth beneath the sun of heaven.
She was not laughing now.
Everything here is so weak, little girl. Everything breaks so easily. They want such simple things. I will take all I want from this world, like a child stuffing its fat little face with blackberries from a bush.
I did not let go of Lettie's hand. Not this time. I stroked the kitten, whose needle claws were digging into my shoulder. It was bitten for my trouble, but the bite was not hard, just scared. Her voice came from all around us as the storm wind gusted.
You kept me away from here for a long time, but then you brought me a door, and I used him to carry me out of my cell. And what can you do now that I am out?
Lettie didn't seem angry. She thought about it, and then she said,
I could make you a new door. Or better still, I could get Granny to send you across the ocean, all the way to wherever you came from in the beginning.
Ursula Monkton spat onto the grass, and a tiny ball of flame sputtered and fizzed on the ground, where the spit had fallen.
Give me the boy.
Was
He
all she-
belongs to me. I came here inside him. I own him.
You don't own nothing. You don't.
said Lettie Hempstock angrily.
Especially not him.
Lettie helped me to my feet, and she stood behind me and put her arms around me. We were two children in a field in the night. She held me, and I held the kitten, which, while above us and all around us, a voice said,
What will you do? Take him home with you? This world is a world of rules, little girl. He belongs to his parents, after all. Take him away, and his parents will come to bring him home. And his parents belong to me.
I'm all bored with you now.
said Lettie Hempstock.
I give you a chance. You're on my land. Go away.
As she said that, my skin felt like it did when I rubbed the balloon on my sweater. Then it touched my face and hair. Everything prickled and tickled. My hair was soaked, but even wet, it felt like it was starting to stand on end. Lettie Hempstock held me tightly.
Don't worry,
she whispered. And I was going to say something, to ask why I shouldn't worry, what I had to be afraid of, when the field we were standing in began to glow. It glowed golden. Every blade of grass glowed and glimmered, every leaf on every tree, even the hedges were glowing. It was a warm light. It seemed to my eyes as if the soil beneath the grass had transmuted from base matter into pure light. And in the golden glow of the meadow and the blue-white lightning that still cracked around Ursula Monkton seemed less impressive. Ursula Monkton rose unsteadily, as if the air had just become hot and was carrying her upwards. Then Lettie Hempstock whispered old words into the world, and the meadow exploded into a golden light. I saw Ursula Monkton swept up and away, although I felt no wind. But there had to be a wind, for she was flailing and tipping like a dead leaf in the gale. I watched her tumble into the night, and then Ursula Monkton and her new lightnings were gone.
come on.
Said Lettie Hempstock.
We should get you in front of a kitchen fire and a hot bath. You'll catch your death.
She let go of my hand, stopped hugging me, stepped back. The golden glow dimmed, so slowly, and then it was gone, leaving only vanishing glimmers and twinkles in the bushes, like the final moments of the fireworks on bonfire night.
Is she dead?
I asked.
No,
Then she'll come back, and you'll get in trouble.
that's a maybe.
Said Lettie.
Are you hungry?
She asked me, and I knew that I was. I had forgotten somehow, but now I remembered. I was so hungry, it hurt.
Let's see.
Lettie was thinking. She was talking as she led me through the fields.
You're wet through. We'll need to get you something to wear. I'll have a look in the chest of drawers in the green bedroom. I think Cousin Japheth left some of his clothes there when he went off to fight in the Mouse Wars. He wasn't much bigger than you.
The kitten was licking my fingers with a small, rough tongue.
I found a kitten.
I said.
I can see that. She must have followed you back from the fields where you pulled her up.
This is that kitten? The same one that I picked?
Yep. Did she tell you her name yet?
No. Do they do that?
Sometimes, if you listen.
I saw the lights of the Hempstock's farm in front of us, welcoming, and I was cheered, although I could not understand how we had got from the field where we were into the farmhouse so quickly.
You were lucky.
Said Lettie.
15 feet further back, and that field belongs to Colin Anders.
You would have come anyway.
I told her.
You would have saved me.
She squeezed my arm with her hand, but she said nothing. I said,
Lettie, I don't want to go home.
that was not true. I wanted to go home more than anything, just not to the place I had fled that night. I wanted to go back to the home I had lived in before the opal miner had killed himself and our little white Minnie, or before he had run over my kitten. The ball of dark fur pressed itself into my chest, and I wished she was my kitten, and knew that she was not. The rain had become a drizzle once again. We splashed through deep puddles, Lettie in her Wellington boots. my stinking feet bare. The smell of manure was sharp in the air as we reached the farmyard. Then we walked through a slide door into the huge... Chapter 11. Lettie's mother was prodding the huge fireplace with a poker, pushing the burning logs together. Old Mrs. Hempstock was stirring a bulbous pot on the stove with a large wooden spoon. She lifted the spoon to her mouth, blew on it, theatrically, sipped from it, pursed her lips, then added a pinch of something and a fistful of something else. She turned down the flame, then she looked at me, from my wet hair to my bare feet, which were blue with cold. As I stood there, a puddle began to appear on the flagstone floor around me, and the drips of water from my dressing gown splashed into it.
Hot bath,
Said old Mrs. Hempstock.
or he'll catch his death.
That was what I said.
Said Lettie. Lettie's mother was already hauling in a tin bath from beneath the kitchen table and filling it with steamy water from the enormous black kettle that hung above the fireplace. Pots of cold water were added until she pronounced it was the perfect temperature.
Right, in you go.
Said old Mrs. Hempstock.
Spit spot.
I looked at her, horrified. Was I going to have to undress in front of people I didn't know?
We'll wash your clothes and dry them for you, and mend that dressing gown,
Said Lettie's mother. And she took the dressing gown from me, and she took the kitten, which I barely realized I was still holding, and then she walked away. As quickly as possible, I shed my red nylon pajamas. The bottoms were soaked, and the legs were now ragged and ripped, and would never be whole again. I dipped my fingers into the water, and then I climbed in, and sat in the tin bath, in that reassuring kitchen in front of the huge fire. And I leaned back in the hot water. My feet began to throb as they came back to life. I knew that naked was wrong, but the Hempstock seemed indifferent to my nakedness. Lettie was gone, and my pajamas and dressing gown were with her. Her mother was laying the table, getting out and arranging knives, forks, spoons, little jugs, and bigger jugs, carrying knives and wooden trenchers and arranging them. Old Mrs. Hempstock passed me a mug, filled with soup from the black pot on the stove.
Get that down, you. Heat you up from the inside first.
The soup was rich and warming. I had never drunk soup in a bath before. It was a perfectly new experience. When I finished the mug, I gave it back to her, and in return she passed me a large cake of white soap and a face flannel and said,
Now get scrubbing. Rub the life and warmth back into your bones.
She sat down in a rocking chair on the other side of the fire and rocked gently, not looking at me. I felt safe. It was as if the essence of grandmotherliness had been condensed into that one place, that one time. I was not at all afraid of Ursula Monkton. Whatever she was, not then, not there. Young Mrs. Hempstock opened the oven door and took out a pie, its shiny crust brown and glistening, and put it on the window ledge to cool. I dried myself off with a towel they brought me, the fire's heat drying me as much as the towel did. Then Lettie Hempstock returned and gave me a voluminous white thing, like a girl's nightdress made out of white cotton, with long arms and a skirt that dragged to the floor, and a white cap. I hesitated to put it on, until I realized what it was. A nightgown. I had seen pictures of them in books. Wee Willie Winky ran through the town wearing one in every book of nursery rhymes I had ever owned. I slipped into it. The nightcap was too big for me, and fell down over my face, and Lettie took it away once more. Dinner was wonderful. There was a joint of beef with roast potatoes, golden crisp on the outside and soft and white inside. Buttered greens I did not recognize, although I think now that they might have been nettles, roast carrots, blackened and sweet. I did not think that I liked cooked carrots, so nearly did not eat one, but I was brave, and I tried it, and I liked it, and was disappointed in boiled carrots for the rest of my childhood. For dessert, he had pie, stuffed with apples and with swollen raisins and crushed nuts, all topped with a thick yellow custard, creamier and richer than anything I had ever tasted at school or at home. The kitten slept on a cushion beside the fire until the end of the meal, when it joined a fawn-colored house cat 4 times its size in a meal of scraps of meat. While we ate, nothing was said about what happened to me or why I was there. The Hempstock ladies talked about the farm. There was the door to the milking shed needing a new coat of paint, and a cow named Rhiannon, who looked to be getting lame in her rear left leg. The path to be cleared on the way that led down to the reservoir.
Is it just the 3 of you?
I asked.
Aren't there any men?
Hooted old Mrs. Hempstock.
I don't know what blessed good a man would be. Nothing a man could do around this farm that I can't do twice as fast and 5 times as well.
Lettie said.
We've had men here sometimes. They come and they go. Right now, it's just us.
Her mother nodded.
They went off to seek their fate and fortune, mostly, the male Hempstocks. There's never any keeping them here when the call comes. They get a distant look in their eyes, and then we've lost them, good and proper. Next chance they get, they're off to towns and even cities, and nothing but an occasional postcard to show they were here at all.
Old Mrs. Hempstock said.
His parents are coming. They're driving here. They just passed Parson's elm tree. The badgers saw them.
Is she with them?
I asked.
Ursula Monkton?
Her?
Said old Mrs. Hempstock, amused.
That thing. Not her.
I thought about it for a moment.
They'll make me go back with them, and then she'll lock me in the attic and let my daddy kill me when she gets bored. She said so.
She may have told you that, Dax,
said Lettie's mother.
But she ain't gonna do it or anything like it, and my name is not Ginnie Hempstock.
I liked the name Ginny, but I did not believe her, and I was not reassured. Soon the door to the kitchen would open and my father would shout at me, or he would wait until we got into the car, and he would shout at me then. And then they would take me back up to the lane, to my house, and I would be lost.
Let's see,
said Ginny Hempstock.
We could be away when they get here. They could arrive last Tuesday, when nobody's home.
Out of the question,
said the old woman.
Just complicates things playing with time. We could turn the boy into something else so they'll never find him, look how hard they might.
I blinked. Was that even possible? I wanted to be turned into something. The kitten had finished its portion of meat scraps. Indeed, it seemed to have eaten more than the house cat. And now it leapt into my lap and began to wash itself. Ginny Hempstock got up and went out of the room. I wondered where she was going.
We can't turn him into anything,
said Lettie, clearing the table of the last of the plates and the cutlery.
His parents will get frantic. And if they're being controlled by the flea, she'll just feed the franticness. Next thing you know, we'll have the police dragging the reservoir looking for him. Or worse, the ocean.
The kitten laid down and curled up, wrapping itself until it was nothing more than a flattened circlet of fluffy black fur. It closed its vivid blue eyes, the color of an ocean, and it slept, and it purred.
Well,
said old Mrs. Hempstock.
What do you suggest, then?
Lettie thought, pushing her lips together, moving them over to one side. Her head tipped, and I thought she was running through alternatives. Then her face brightened.
Snip and stitch,
she said.
You're a good girl,
she said.
I'm not saying you're not. But snippage, well, you couldn't do that. Not yet. You'd have to cut the edges out exactly. Sew them back without the seams showing. And what would you cut out? The flea wouldn't let you snip her. She's not in the fabric. She's outside of it.
Ginny Hempstock returned. She was carrying my old dressing gown.
I put it through the mangle,
she said.
But it's still damp. That'll make the edges harder to line up. You don't want to do needlework when it's still damp.
She put the dressing gown down on the table in front of old Mrs. Hempstock. Then she pulled out the front pocket of her apron a pair of scissors, black and old, a long needle and a spool of red thread.
Rowan, berry, and red thread. Stop a witch in her speed.
I recited. It was something I had read in a book.
That'd work, and well,
Said Lettie.
if there was any witches involved in all this. But there's not.
Old Mrs. Hempstock was examining my dressing gown. It was brown and faded, with a sort of sepia tartan across it. It had been a present from my father's parents, my grandparents, several birthdays ago, when it had been comically big on me.
Probably.
She said, as if she was talking to herself.
It would be best if your father was happy for you to stay the night here. But if for that to happen, they couldn't be angry with you. Or even worried.
The black scissors were in her hand, and already snip, snip, snipping. Then when I heard a knock on the front door, and Ginny Hempstock got up to answer it.
Don't let them take me,
I said to Lettie. She said,
I'm working here while grandmother's snipping. You just be sleepy and at peace. Happy.
I was far from happy, and not in the slightest bit sleepy. Lettie leaned across the table and took my hand.
Don't worry,
she said. And with that the door opened, and my father and my mother were in the kitchen. I wanted to hide, but the kitten shifted reassuringly on my lap, and Lettie smiled at me. A reassuring smile.
We're looking for our son,
my father was saying.
And we have reason to believe.
And even as he was saying that, my mother was striding towards me.
There he is. Oh, darling, we were worried silly.
You're in a lot of trouble, young man,
said my father. Snip, snip, snip went the black scissors, and the irregular section of fabric that old Mrs. Hempstock had been cutting fell to the table. My parents froze. They stopped talking, stopped moving. My father's mouth was still open. My mother stood on one leg, unmoving, as if she were a shop window dummy.
What did you do to them?
I was unsure whether or not I ought to be upset. Ginny Hempstock said,
Oh, they're fine. Just a little snipping. Then a little sewing. And it'll all be good as gold.
She reached down to the table, pointing to the scrap of faded green dressing. Not green. My memory's failing me wholly. Points to the scrap of faded dressing gown tartan resting upon it.
That's your dad and you in the hallway. And that's the bathtub. She snipped that out. So without any of that, there's no reason for your daddy to be angry with you.
I had not told them about the bathtub. I did not wonder how she knew. Now the old woman was threading the needle with the red thread. She sighed, theatrically.
Old eyes, old eyes.
But she licked the tip of the thread and pushed it through the eye of the needle without any apparent difficulty.
Lettie, you'll need to know what his toothbrush looks like,
said the old woman. She began to sew the edges of the dressing gown together with tiny, careful stitches.
What's your toothbrush look like?
asked Lettie.
Quickly.
It's green,
I said.
bright green, a sort of appley green. It's not very big, just a green toothbrush, my size.
I wasn't describing it very well. I knew. I pictured it in my head, tried to find something more about it that I could describe to set it apart from all other toothbrushes. No good. I imagined it and saw it in my mind's eye with the other toothbrushes in its red, white, spotted beaker above the bathroom sink.
Got it,
said Lettie.
Nice job.
Very nearly done here,
said old Mrs. Hempstock. Ginny Hempstock smiled a huge smile, and it lit up her ruddy round face. Old Mrs. Hempstock picked up the scissors and snipped a final time, and a fragment of red thread fell to the tabletop. My mother's foot came down. She took a step, and then she stopped. My father said, Ginny said.
And it made our Lettie so happy that your boy would come here and stay the night. It's a bit old-fashioned here, I'm afraid,
the old woman said.
We've got an inside lavvy nowadays. I don't know how much more modern anybody could be. Outside lavvies and chamber pots were good enough for me.
Well, he ate a fine meal,
said Ginny.
Didn't you?
There was pie.
I told my parents.
For dessert.
My father's brow was creased. He looked confused. Then he put his hand into the pocket of his cork coat and pulled out something long and green, with toilet paper wrapped around the top.
You forgot your toothbrush,
he said.
Thought you'd want it.
Now, if he wants to come home, he can come home.
My mother was saying to Ginny Hempstock.
He went to stay the night at the Kovacs' house a few months ago, and by 9 he was calling us to come and get him.
This isn't like when I went to Christopher Kovacs' house, I told my mother, embarrassed.
Have we just skipped a bit? Christopher Kovacs was 2 years older and a head taller than me.
It's possible that you're using the older version. There's like a newer, I think she made some cuts.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry.
Do you want me to send you the document?
Yeah, if you could just send it on the chat now, sorry.
Yeah, no worries, I got you. Oh, I forgot the chat's here. I knew that. Pardon us, we are doing a little bit of technical tingamajigs.
Sorry, everyone.
You're good.
I got you, Matt. I already did it.
You know what, Izzy? You've always been faster than me, so it's fine. Thank you very much. We're supposed to be on page
84, Briony.
Yep.
It doesn't give me pages on the Google Docs.
If you go to the scroll bar on the side of the page, there should appear a little black text box letting you know what page you're on.
Ah, all right, cool. Thank you. Sorry.
The line was, "This isn't like when I went to Christopher Kovacs' house."
No worries, it's still loading pages. It's only up to like 60 odd pages. So it won't let me scroll.
Take your time. We're chilling. I haven't been checking any of the stream chats. I should take a minute to look at that. We are being offered to become famous on Twitch, apparently. That's fun.
Okay.
Do we want to become famous? It's just one little click, bigfollows.com. We out?
Right, I'm sorted. Sorry about that.
No worries. You find it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
This isn't like when I went to Christopher Kovac's house.
I told my mother, embarrassed.
I like it here.
What are you wearing?
She stared at my wee willy winky nightgown in puzzlement. Ginnie said,
He had a little accident. He was wearing that while his pajamas are drying.
Oh, I see.
said my mother.
Well, good night, dear. Have a nice time with your new friends.
She peered down at Lettie.
What's your name again, dear?
Lettie,
said Lettie Hempstock.
Oh, is it short for Letitia?
asked my mother.
I knew Letitia when I was at university. Of course, everybody called her Lettuce.
Lettie just smiled and did not say anything at all. My father put my toothbrush down on the table in front of me. I unwrapped the toilet paper around the head, and it was, unmistakably, my green toothbrush. Under his car coat, my father was wearing a clean white shirt and no tie. I said,
Thank you.
So,
said my mother.
What time should we be by to pick him up in the morning?
Ginnie smiled even wider.
Oh, Lettie will bring him back to you. We should give them some time to play tomorrow morning. Now, before you go, I baked some scones this afternoon.
And she put some scones into a paper bag, which my mother took politely, and Ginnie ushered her and my father out of the door. I held my breath until I heard the sound of the rover being driven away back up the lane.
What did you do to them?
I asked, and then,
Is this really my toothbrush?
That
said old Mrs. Hempstock, with satisfaction in her voice.
was a very respectable job of snipping and stitching, if you ask me.
She held up my dressing gown. I could not see where she had removed a piece, where she had stitched it up. It was seamless. The mend was invisible. She pushed the scrap of fabric that she had cut across the table.
Here's your evening,
she said.
You can keep it if you wish, but if I were you, I'd burn it.
The rain pattered against the window, and the wind rattled the window frames. I picked up the jagged-edged silver of cloth. It was damp. I got up, waking the kitten, who sprang off and vanished into the shadows. I walked over to the fireplace.
If I burn this,
I asked them.
Will it have really happened? Will my daddy have pushed me down into the bath? Will I forget it ever happened?
Ginnie Hempstock was no longer smiling. Now she looked concerned.
What do you want?
she asked.
I want to remember.
I said.
Because it happened to me, and I'm still me.
I threw the little scrap of cloth onto the fire. There was a crackle, and the cloth smoked, and then it began to burn. I was under the water. I was holding on to my father's tie. I thought he was going to kill me. I screamed. I was lying on the flagstone floor of the Hempstock's kitchen. I was rolling and screaming. My foot felt like I had trodden barefoot on a burning cinder. The pain was intense. There was another pain, too, deep inside my chest, more distant, not as sharp. A discomfort, not a burning. Ginnie was beside me.
What's wrong?
My foot is on fire. It hurts so much.
She examined it, then licked her finger, touched the hole in my sole from which I had pulled the worm 2 days before. There was a hissing noise, and the pain in my foot began to ease.
I'd never seen one of these before,
said Ginnie Hempstock.
How did you get it?
There was a worm inside.
There was a worm inside it.
I told her.
That's how it came with us, from the place with the orangey sky, in my foot.
And then I looked at Lettie, who had crouched beside me and was now holding my hand, and I said,
I brought it back. It was my fault. I'm sorry.
Old Mrs. Hempstock was the last to reach me. She leaned over, pulled the sole of my foot up into the light.
Nasty,
she said.
And very clever. She left the hole inside you so she could use it again. She could have hidden inside you if she needed to, used you as a door to go home. Oh, no wonder she wanted to keep you in the attic. So, let's strike while the iron's hot, as the soldier said when he entered the laundry.
She prodded the hole in my foot with her finger. It still hurt, but the pain had faded. A little. Now it felt like a throbbing headache inside of my foot. Something fluttered in my chest like a tiny moth and then was still. Old Mrs. Hempstock said,
Can you be brave?
I did not know. I did not think so. It seemed to me that all I had done so far that night was to run from things. She was holding the needle she had used to sew up my dressing gown, and she grasped it now not as if she were going to sew it, but as if she were planning to stab me. I pulled my foot back.
What are you going to do?
Lettie squeezed my hand.
She's going to make the hole go away.
She said.
I'll hold your hand. You don't have to look. Not if you don't want to.
It will hurt,
I said.
Stuff and nonsense,
said the old woman. She pulled my foot towards her so the sole was facing her and stabbed the needle down, not into my foot, I realized, but into the hole itself. It did not hurt. Then she twisted the needle and pulled it back towards her. I watched, amazed at something that glistened. It seemed black at first, then translucent, then reflective like mercury was pulled out from the sole of my foot on the end of the needle. I could feel it leaving my leg. It seemed to travel all the way up inside of me, up my leg, through my groin and my stomach and into my chest. I felt it leave me with relief. The burning sensation abated, as did my terror. My heart pounded strangely. I watched old Mrs. Hempstock reel the thing in, and I was still unable, somehow, to entirely make sense of what I was seeing. It was a hole with nothing around it, over 2 feet long, thinner than an earthworm, like the shed skin of a translucent snake. And then she stopped reeling it in.
Doesn't want to come out,
she said.
It's holding on.
There was a coldness in my heart, as if a chip of ice were lodged there. The old woman gave an expert flick of her wrist, and then the glistening thing was dangling from my needle. I found myself thinking, now, not of mercury, but of the silver slime trail that snails leave in the garden, and it no longer went into my foot. She let go of my sole, and I pulled my foot back. The tiny round hole had vanished completely, as if it had never been there. Old Mrs. Hempstock cackled with glee.
Thinks she's so clever. Leaving her way home inside the boy. Is that clever? I don't think that's clever. I wouldn't give tuppence for the lot.
Ginnie Hempstock produced an empty jam jar. The old woman put the bottom of the dangling thing into it, then raised the jar to hold it. At the end, she slipped the glistening visible trail of the needle and put the lid on the jam jar with a decisive flick of her bony wrist. She said again and again. Lettie said.
Can I see it?
She took the jam jar, held it up to the light. Inside the jar, the thing had begun lazily to uncurl. It seemed to be floating, as if the jar had been filled with water. It changed color as it caught the light in different ways, sometimes black, sometimes silver. An experiment that I had found in a book of things boys could do, and which I had, of course, done. If you take an egg and blacken it, completely with soot from a candle flame, and then put it into a clear container filled with salt water, it will float in the water, and it will seem to be silver, a peculiar artificial silver. That is only a trick of the light. I thought of that egg then. Lettie seemed fascinated.
You're right. She left her way home inside him. No wonder she didn't want him to leave.
I said.
I'm sorry I let go of your hand, Lettie.
Oh, hush. It's always too late for sorries, but I appreciate the sentiment. And next time, you'll keep hold of my hand, no matter what she throws at us.
I nodded. The ice strip in my heart seemed to warm then and melt, and I began to feel whole and safe once more.
So, we've got her way home, and we've got the boys safe. That's a good night's worker. I don't know what is.
But she's got the boy's parents. And his sister. And we can't just leave her free as a daisy. Remember what happened in Cromwell's day? And before that, when Red Rufus was running around. Fleas attract varmints.
She said as if it were a natural law.
Well, that can wait until the morrow. Now, Lettie, take the lad and find a room for him to sleep in. He's had a long day.
The black kitten was curled up on the rocking chair beside the fireplace.
Can I bring the kitten with me?
If you don't, she'll just come and find you.
Ginny produced 2 candlesticks, the kind with big round handles, each one with a shapeless blob of white wax in it. She lit a wooden taper from the kitchen fire, then transferred the flame first to one candle wick and then to the other. She handed a candle to me, the other to Lettie.
Don't you have electricity?
I asked. There were electric lights in the kitchen, big old-fashioned bulbs hanging from the ceiling, filaments showing.
In that part of the house. The kitchen's new. Sort of. Put your hand in front of your candle as you walk. So that way it doesn't blow out.
She cupped her own hand around the flame as she said this, and I copied her and walked behind her. The black kitten followed us. Out of the kitchen, through a wooden door painted white, down a step and into the farmhouse. It was dark, and our candles cast huge shadows. So it looked to me. As we walked, as if everything was moving, pushed and shaped by the shadows. The grandfather clock and the stuffed animals and the birds. Were they stuffed? I wondered. Did that owl move, or was it just the candle flame that made me think it had turned its head as we passed? The hall table, the chairs, all of them moved, and all of them stayed perfectly still. We went up a set of stairs, and then up some steps, and we passed an open window. The moonlight spilled onto the stairs, brighter than our candle flames. I glanced up through the window, and I saw the full moon. The cloudless sky was splashed with stars beyond all counting.
That's the moon.
Gran likes it like that,
said Lettie.
But it was a crescent moon yesterday, and now it's full. And it was raining. It is raining, but now it's not.
Gran likes
the full moon to shine on this side of the house. She says it's restful, and it reminds her of when she was a girl. And you don't trip on the stairs.
The kitten followed us up the stairs in a sequence of bounces. It made me smile. At the top of the house was Lettie's room, and beside it another room, and it was this room that we entered. A fire blazed in the hearth, illuminating the room with oranges and yellows. The room was warm and inviting. The bed had posts at each corner, and it had its own curtains. I had seen something like it in cartoons, but never in real life.
There's clothes already set out for you to put on in the morning. I'll be asleep in the next room next door if you want me. Just shout or knock if you need anything, and I'll come in. Gran said for you to use the inside lavatory, but it's a long way through the house, and you might get lost. So if you need to do your business, there's a chamber pot under the bed. Same as there's always been.
I blew out my candle and pushed through the curtains into the bed. The room was warm, but the sheets were cold. The bed shook as if something landed on it, and then small feet patted up the blankets, and a warm, furry presence pushed itself into my face, and the kitten began softly to purr. There was still a monster in my house, and in a fragment of time that had perhaps been snipped out of reality, my father had pushed me down into the water of the bath and tried perhaps to drown me. I had run for miles through the dark. I had seen my father kissing and touching the thing that called itself Ursula Monkton. The dread had not left my soul. But there was a kitten on my pillow, and it was purring in my face and vibrating gently with every purr, and very soon I slept. Chapter 10. I had dreams in that house that night. I woke myself in the darkness. I knew only that a dream had scared me so badly I had to wake up or die. And yet, try as I might, I could not remember what I had dreamed. The dream was haunting me, standing behind me, present and invisible like the back of my head, simultaneously there and not there. I missed my father, and I missed my mother, and I missed my bed in my house only a mile or so away. I missed yesterday before Ursula Monkton, before my father's anger, before the bathtub. I wanted that yesterday to come back again. And I wanted it so badly. I tried to pull the dream that had upset me so to the front of my mind, but it could not be done. There was betrayal in it, I knew, and loss, and time. The dream left me scared to go back to sleep. The fireplace was almost dark now, and with only the deep red glows of embers in the hearth to mark that it had been once burning, once had given light. I climbed down the four-poster bed and felt beneath it until I found the heavy china chamber pot. I hitched up my nightgown and I used it. Then I walked to the window and looked out. The moon was still full, but now it was low in the sky, and a dark orange. What my mother called a harvest moon, but things were harvested in autumn, as I knew, not in spring. In the orange moonlight, I could see an old woman. I was almost certain it was old Mrs. Hempstock, although it was hard to see her face properly, walking up and down. She had a big long stick she was leaning on, and as she walked, like a staff. She reminded me of the soldiers on parade I had seen on a trip to London, outside Buckingham Place, as they marched backwards and forwards on a parade. I watched her, and I was comforted. I climbed back into my bed in the dark, laid my head on the empty pillow, and thought, I'll never go back to sleep. Not now. And then I opened my eyes and saw that it was morning. There were clothes I had never seen before on a chair by the bed. There were 2 china jugs of water, one steaming hot, one cold. Beside the bowl that I realized was a hand basin, set into a small wooden table. There was a fluffy black kitten on the foot of the bed. It opened its eyes as I sat up. They were a vivid blue-green, unnatural and odd, like the sea in summer, and it mewed a high-pitched, questioning noise. I stroked it. Then I got out of bed. I mixed the hot water and the cold in the basin, and I washed my face and hands. I cleaned my teeth with the cold water. There was no toothpaste, but there was a small round tin box on which was written, Max Melton's remarkably efficacious tooth powder, in old-fashioned letters. I put some of the white powder on my green toothbrush, and cleaned my teeth with it. It tasted minty and lemony in my mouth. I examined the clothes. They were unlike anything I had ever worn before. There were no underpants. There was a white undershirt, with no buttons, but with a long tail. There were brown trousers that stopped at the knees, long white stockings, and a chestnut-colored jacket with a V cut into the back, like a swallow's tail. The light brown socks were more like stockings. I put the clothes on as best as I could, wishing there were more zips or clasps, rather than hooks and buttons and stuff, unyielding buttonholes. The shoes had silver buckles in front, but the shoes were too big and did not fit me, so I went out of the room in my stockinged feet, and the kitten followed me. To reach my room the night before, I had walked upstairs, and at the top of the stairs turned left. Now I turned right, and walked past Lettie's bedroom. The door was ajar, the room was empty, and made for the stairs. But the stairs were not where I remembered them. The corridor entered a blank wall, and a window that looked out over the woodland and fields. The black kitten with the blue-green eyes mewed loudly as if to attract my attention, and turned back down the corridor in a self-important strut, tail held high. It led me back down the hall, round a corner and down a passage I had never seen before, to a staircase. The kitten bounced amiably down the stairs, and I followed. Ginnie Hempstock was standing at the foot of the stairs.
Oh, you slept long and well. We've already milked the cows. Your breakfast is on the table, and there's a saucer of cream by the fireplace for your friend.
Where's Lettie Hempstock? Well, where's Lettie, Mrs. Hempstock?
Off on an errand, getting stuff she may need. It has to go, the thing at your house, or there will be trouble, and worse will follow. She's already bound it once, and it's slipped the bounds. So she needs to send it home.
I just want Ursula Monkton to go away. I hate her.
Ginnie Hempstock put out a finger, ran it across my jacket.
It's not what anyone else hereabouts is wearing these days. But my man put a little glamour on it, so it's not as if anyone will notice. You can walk around in it all you want, and not a soul will think there's anything odd about it. No shoes?
They didn't fit.
I'll leave something that will fit you by the back door then.
Thank you.
I don't hate her. She does what she does, according to nature. She was asleep. She woke up. She's trying to give everyone what they want.
She hasn't given me anything I want. She says she wants to put me in the attic.
That's as may be. You were her way here, and it's a dangerous thing to be a door.
She tapped my chest, above my heart, with her forefinger.
And she was better off where she was. We would have sent her home safely. Done it before for her kind a dozen times. But she's headstrong, that one. No teaching them. Right. Your breakfast is on the table. I'll be up in the 9-acre field if anyone needs me.
There was a bowl of porridge on the kitchen table, and beside it a saucer with a lump of golden honeycomb on it, and a jug of rich yellow cream. I spooned up a piece of honeycomb and mixed it into the thick porridge, then I poured in the cream. There was toast, too, cooked beneath the grill, as my father cooked it, with homemade blackberry jam. There was the best cup of tea I had ever drunk. By the fireplace, the kitten lapped at a saucer of creamy milk, and purred so loudly I could hear it across the room. I wish I could purr, too. I would have purred then. Lettie came in, carrying a shopping bag. The old-fashioned kind. Elderly women used to carry them to the shops. Big woven bags that were almost baskets. Raffia work outside and lined with cloth, with rope handles. This basket was almost full. Her cheek had been scratched and had bled, although the blood had dried. She looked miserable.
Hello.
Well, let me tell you, if you think that was fun, that wasn't any fun. Not one bit. Mandrakes are so loud when you pull them out. And I didn't have earplugs. And I swapped it for a shadow bottle, an old-fashioned one with lots of shadows dissolved in vinegar.
She buttered some toast, then crushed a lump of golden honeycomb onto it and started munching.
And that was just to get me to the bazaar. And they aren't even meant to be open yet. But I got most of what I needed there.
Can I look?
If you want to.
I looked into the basket. It was filled with broken toys, dolls' eyes, and heads, and hands. Cars with no wheels, chipped cat's eye glass marbles. Lettie reached up and took down the jam jar from the window ledge. Inside it, the silvery translucent wormhole shifted and twisted and spiraled and turned. Lettie dropped it onto the shopping bag with the broken toys. The kitten slept and ignored us entirely.
You don't have to come with me for this bit. You can stay here while I go and talk to her.
I thought about it.
I'd feel safer with you.
I told her. She did not look happy at this. She said,
Let's go down to the ocean.
The kitten opened its 2 blue eyes and stared at us disinterestedly as we left. There were black leather boots, like riding boots, waiting for me by the back door. They looked old, but well cared for, and were just my size. I put them on, although I felt more comfortable in sandals. Together, Lettie and I walked down to her ocean, by which I mean the pond. We sat on the old bench and looked at the placid brown surface of the pond, and the lily pads and the scum of duckweed by the water's edge.
You aren't people.
Are too.
I shook my head.
I bet you don't actually look like that. Not really.
Lettie shrugged.
Nobody looks like what they really are on the inside. You don't. I don't. People are much more complicated than that. It's true for everybody.
Are you a monster? Like Ursula Monkton?
Lettie threw a pebble into the pond.
I don't think so. Monsters come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them are things people are scared of. Some of them are things that look like things people used to be scared of a long time ago. Sometimes monsters are things people should be scared of, but they aren't.
People should be scared of Ursula Monkton.
Perhaps. What do you think Ursula Monkton is scared of?
Dunno. Why do you think she's scared of anything? She's a grown-up, isn't she? Grown-ups and monsters aren't scared of things.
Oh, monsters are scared. And as for grown-ups...
She stopped talking, rubbed her freckled nose with a finger. Then,
I'm going to tell you something important. Grown-ups don't look like grown-ups on the inside either. Outside, they're big and thoughtless, and they always know what they're doing. Inside, they look just like they always have, like they did when they were your age. The truth is, there aren't any grown-ups, not one, in the whole world.
she thought for a moment, then smiled.
Except for Granny, of course.
We sat there, side by side, on the old wooden bench, not saying anything. I thought about adults. I wondered if that was true. If they were all really children wrapped in adult bodies, like children's books hidden in the middle of dull, long books, the kind with no pictures or conversations.
I love my ocean.
Lettie said in the end.
It's just pretending, though.
I told her, feeling like I was letting childhood down by admitting it.
Your pond. It's not an ocean. It can't be. Oceans are bigger than seas. Your pond is just a pond.
It's as big as it needs to be.
Said Lettie Hempstock, nettled. She said,
We better get on with sending Ursula, what's her name, back where she came from. I do know what she's scared of. And you know what? I'm scared of them too.
The kitten was nowhere to be seen when we returned to the kitchen, although the fog-colored cat was sitting on the windowsill, staring out at the world. The breakfast things had all been tidied up and put away, and my red pajamas and my dressing gown, neatly folded, were waiting for me on the table, in a large brown paper bag, along with my green toothbrush.
You won't let her get me, will you?
I asked Lettie. She shook her head, and together we walked up the winding, flinty lane that led to my house, and to the thing who called herself Ursula Monkton. I carried the brown paper bag with my nightwear in it, and Lettie carried her too-big-for-her raffia shopping bag, filled with broken toys, which she had obtained in exchange for a mandrake that screamed, and shadows dissolved in vinegar. Children, as I have said, use backways and hidden tracks, while adults take roads and official paths. We went off the road, took a shortcut that Lettie knew led us through some fields, then into the extensive abandoned gardens of a rich man's crumbling home, and then back onto the lane again. We came out just before the place where I had gone over the metal fence. Lettie sniffed the air. Lettie?
Heba?
Hi. Lettie sniffed the air. Page 97.
No varmints yet. That's good.
What are varmints?
She said only,
You'll know 'em when you see 'em. And I hope you'll never see 'em.
Are we going to sneak in?
Why would we do that? We'll go up in the drive and through the front door, like gentry.
we started up the drive. I said,
Are you going to make a spell and send her away?
We don't do spells.
she said. She sounded like a little disappointed to admit it.
We'll do recipes sometimes, but no spells or cantrips. Gran doesn't hold with none of that. She says it's common.
So what's the stuff in the shopping bag for then?
It's to stop things traveling when you don't want them to. Mark boundaries.
In the morning sunlight, my house looked so welcoming and friendly. Warm red bricks and a red tile roof. Lettie reached into the shopping bag. She took a marble from it, pushed it into the still damp soil, then, instead of going into the house, she turned left, walking the edge of the property. By Mr. Wallery's vegetable patch, we stopped, and she took something else from her shopping bag. A headless, legless, pink doll body, with badly chewed hands. She buried it inside the pea plants. We picked some pea pods, opened them, and ate the peas inside. Peas baffled me. I could not understand why grown-ups would make things that tasted so good raw, and put them in tins, and make them revolting. Lettie placed a toy wolf, the small plastic kind you would find at a children's zoo, or an ark, in the coal shed, beneath a large lump of coal. The coal shed smelled of damp and blackness and of old, crushed forests.
Will these things make her go away?
No.
Then what are they for?
To stop her going away.
But we want her to go away.
No, we want her to go home.
I stared at her short brown hair, her snub nose, her freckles. She looked 3 or 4 years older than me. She might have been 3,000 or 4,000 years older, or 1,000 times again. I would have trusted her to the gates of hell and back, but still.
I wish you'd explain properly. You talk in mysteries all the time.
I was not scared, though. And I could not have told you why I was not scared. I trusted Lettie, just as I had trusted her when we had gone in search of the flapping thing beneath the orange sky. I believed in her, and that meant I would come to no harm while I was with her. I knew it in the way I knew the grass was green, that roses had sharp woody thorns, and that breakfast cereal was sweet. We went to the house to the front door. It was not locked, unless we went away on holidays. I do not ever remember it being locked. And we went inside. My sister was practicing piano in the front room. We went in. She heard the noise. She stopped playing chopsticks and turned around. She looked at me curiously.
What happened last night?
She
I thought you were in trouble, but then Mommy and Daddy came back and you were just staying with your friends. Why would they say you were sleeping at your friends? You don't have any friends.
She noticed Lettie Hempstock then.
Who's this?
My friend. Where's the horrible monster?
Don't call her that. She's nice. She's having a lie down.
My sister did not say anything about my clothes. Lettie Hempstock took a broken xylophone from her shopping bag and dropped it onto the scree of toys that had accumulated between the piano and the blue toy box with the detached lid.
There. Now it's time to go and say hello.
The first faint stirrings of fear inside my chest. Inside my mind.
Go up to her room, you mean?
Yup.
What's she doing up there?
Still giving people money. Only local people so far. She finds what they think they need, and she tries to give it to them. She's doing it to make the world into something she'll be happier in. Somewhere more comfortable for her. Somewhere cleaner. And she doesn't care so much about giving them money. Not anymore. Now, what she cares about more is people hurting.
As we went upstairs, Lettie placed something on each step, a clear glass marble with a twist of green inside of it. One of the little metal objects we called knuckle bones. A bead, a pair of blue-eyed doll's eyes, connected at the back with white plastic to make them open or close. A small horseshoe magnet, a black pebble, a badge, the kind that came attached to birthday cards, with I am 7 on it, a book of matches, a plastic ladybird with a black magnet in the base, a toy car half squashed, its wheels gone, and last of all, a lead soldier. It was missing the leg. We were at the top of the stairs. The bedroom door was locked. Lettie said,
She won't put you in the attic.
Then, without knocking, she opened the door and she went into the bedroom that had once been mine, and reluctantly I followed. Ursula Monkton was lying on the bed with her eyes closed. She was the first adult woman who was not my mother that I had seen naked, and I glanced at her curiously, but the room was more interesting to me than she was. It was my old bedroom, but it wasn't. Not anymore. There was the little yellow hand basin, just my size, and the walls were still robin's egg blue, as they had been when it was mine. But now strips of cloth hung from the ceiling, gray, ragged cloth strips like bandages, some only a foot long, others dangling almost all the way to the floor. The window was open, and the wind rustled and pushed them, so they swayed gravely, and it seemed as if perhaps the room was moving, like a tent or a ship at sea.
You have to go now,
said Lettie. Ursula Monkton sat up on the bed, and then she opened her eyes, which were the same gray as the hanging cloths. She said, in a voice that still sounded half asleep,
I wondered what I would have to do to bring you both here, and now look, you came.
You didn't bring us here. We came because we wanted to. And I came to give you one last chance to go.
I'm not going now,
said Ursula Monkton, and she sounded petulant, like a very small child who wanted something.
I've only just got here. I have a house now. I have pets. His father is just the sweetest thing. I'm making people happy. There is nothing like me anywhere in this whole world. I was looking just now when you came in. I'm the only one there is. They can't defend themselves. They don't know how. So, this is the best place in the whole world.
She smiled at us both, brightly. She really was pretty for a grown-up. When you are 7, beauty is an abstraction, not an imperative. I wonder what I would have done if she had smiled at me like that now. Whether I would have handed my mind or my heart or my identity to her for the asking, as my father did.
You think this world's like that. You think it's easy, but it ain't.
Of course it is. What are you saying? That you and your family will defend this world against me? You're the only one who ever leaves the borders of your farm, and you tried to bind me without knowing my name. Your mother wouldn't have been that foolish. I'm not scared of you, little girl.
Lettie reached deep into the shopping bag. She pulled out the jam jar with the translucent wormhole inside and held it out.
Here's your way back. I'm being kind, and I'm being nice. Trust me, take it. I don't think you can get any nearer to home than the place we met you, with the orange sky. But that's far enough. I can't get you from there to where you came from in the first place. I asked Gran, and she says even they more. But once you're back, we can find a place for you, somewhere similar, somewhere you'll be happy, somewhere you'll be safe.
Ursula Monkton got off the bed. She stood up and looked down at us. There were no lightings wreathing her, not any longer, but she was scarier standing naked in that bedroom than she had been floating in the storm. She was an adult now. No, more than an adult, she was old, and I have never felt more like a child.
I'm so happy here. So very, very happy.
And then she said almost regretfully,
You're not.
I heard a sound, a soft, raggedy, flapping sound. The great cloths began to detach themselves from the ceiling one by one. They fell, not in a straight line. They fell towards us from all over the room, as if we were magnets pulling them towards our bodies. The first strip of gray cloth landed on the back of my left hand and stuck there. I reached out my right hand and grabbed it, and I pulled the cloth off. It adhered for a moment, and as it pulled off, it made a sucking sound. There was a discolored patch on the back of my left hand, where the cloth had been, and it was as red as if I had been sucking on it for a long, long time, longer than and harder than I ever had in real life, and it was beaded with blood. There were pinpricks of red wetness that smeared as I touched them, and then a long bandage cloth began to attach itself to my legs, and I moved away as a cloth landed on my face and in my forehead, and another wrapped itself over my eyes, blinding me. So I pulled at the cloth on my eyes, but now another cloth circled my wrists, binding them together, and my arms were wrapped and bound to my body, and I stumbled and fell to the floor. If I pulled against the cloths, they hurt me. My world was gray. I gave up. Then I lay there and did not move, concentrated only on breathing through the space the cloth strips left for my nose. They held me, and they felt alive. I lay there and I listened. There was nothing else I could do. Ursula said,
I need the boy safe. I promised I'd keep him in the attic, so the attic it shall be. But you, little farm girl, what shall I do with you? Something appropriate. Perhaps I ought to turn you inside out, so your heart and brains and flesh are all on the outside, and the skin side's inside. Then I'll keep you wrapped up in my room here, with your eyes staring forever at the darkness inside yourself. I can do that.
No,
said Lettie. She sounded sad, I thought.
actually, you can't. And I gave you your chance.
You threatened me. Empty threats.
I don't make threats. I really wanted you to have a chance. When you looked around the world for things like you, didn't you wonder why there weren't lots of other old things around? No, you never wondered. You were so happy with just you here. You never stopped to think. Gran always calls your sort of things fleas. Scarthage of the keep. I mean, she could call you anything. I think she thinks fleas is funny. She don't mind you're kind. She says you're harmless enough. Just a bit stupid. That's because there are things that eat fleas in this part of creation. Varmints, Grandma calls them. She don't like them at all. She says they're mean and they're hard to get rid of. And they're always hungry.
I'm not scared,
said Ursula Monkton. She sounded scared. And then she said,
How did you know my name?
We went
looking for it this morning. Went looking for other things too. Some boundary markers to keep you from running too far, getting into more trouble, and a trail of breadcrumbs that leads straight here to this room. Now, open the bottle, take out the doorway, and let's send you home.
I waited for Ursula Monkton to respond, but she said nothing. There was no answer, only the slamming of the door and the sound of footsteps fast and pounding running down the stairs. Lettie's voice was close to me, and it said,
She would have been better off staying here and taking me up on my offer.
I felt her hands tugging the cloths on my face. It came free with a wet sucking sound, but they no longer felt alive. And when they came off, they fell to the ground and lay there unmoving. This time there was no blood beaded on my skin. The worst thing that happened was that my arms and legs had gone to sleep. Lettie helped me to my feet. She did not look happy.
Where did she go?
She's followed the trail out of the house. She's scared. Poor thing. She's so scared.
You're scared too.
Bit, yes. Right about now, she's going to find that she's trapped inside the bounds. The ones I put down, I expect.
Said Lettie. We went out of the bedroom where the toy soldier at the top of the stairs had been. There was now a rip. That's the best I can describe it. It was as if someone had taken a photograph of the stairs and had torn out the soldier from the photograph. There was nothing in the space where the soldier had been but a dim grayness that hurt my eyes if I looked at it for too long.
What's she scared of?
You heard. Varmints.
Are you scared of varmints, Lettie?
She hesitated, just a moment too long. Then she said simply,
Yes.
But you aren't scared of her, of Ursula?
I can't be scared of her. It's just like Gran said. She's like a flea, all puffed up with pride and power and lust. Just like a flea bloated with blood. But she couldn't have hurt me. I've seen off dozens like her in my time. One has come through in Cromwell's day. Now, there was something to talk about. He made folk lonely. That one. They'd hurt themselves just to make the loneliness stop. Gouge out their eyes or jump down wells. And all the while, that great lummocken thing sits in the cellar of the Duke's head, looking like a squat toad, big as a bulldog.
We were at the bottom of the stairs, walking down the hall.
How do you know where she went?
Oh, she couldn't have gone anywhere but the way I laid out for her.
In the front room, my sister was still playing chopsticks on the piano. Da-da-dum, da-da, da-da-dum, da-da, da-da-dum, da-dum, da-dum, da-da. We walked out of the front door.
He was nasty, that one, back in Cromwell's day. But we got him out of there just before the hunger birds came.
Hunger birds?
What Gran calls varmints, the cleaners.
They didn't sound bad. I knew that Ursula had been scared of them, but I wasn't. Why would you be scared of cleaners?